When a quantity takeoff criteria is applied to a sample line group, a material list is added to the sample line group properties. You can then use this material list to create a volume table or report or a mass haul diagram. In this video, we will examine the process for creating an Earthwork volume report and creating a table as well. The first thing we want to do is actually create a new sample line group that will sample the sources that we want to report on in a separate sample line group. We already have one that we use for creating cross-section views, but let's create a separate one that will be a little more accurate. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to freeze this sample line group as it's on its own unique layer. So I'll go to the Home tab, Layers panel, we'll use the Layer Freeze command, and now that layer is frozen. To create our new sample lines, we'll go to the Profile and Section Views panel in the Home tab and click on Sample Lines. Right-click to select the correct alignment, which is Bypass 1, and click OK. Now, because we already have a sample line group created, we are prompted to just create additional sample lines. In this case, we want to create a brand new sample line group that will be used for our volume and material calculations. Click on the drop-down here and choose Create Sample Line Group. We'll begin with an exclamation point, so this goes to the top of the list when we're creating volume calculations. This will make it a little bit easier. And we'll say for material and volume calculations. As far as layers go, let's put these sample lines and their text on their own separate layer. Click on this button right there and give it a suffix of -vol. Click OK. Now we need to toggle on and off the sources that we need. We don't need everything. All we need is existing ground, the corridor model, and the subgrade surface. So we can turn off finished grade, any of our pipe network objects, and the surface that comes from the corridor object. Click OK. And let's go ahead and define this by station ranges from the beginning of the project to the end of the project. Clicking the drop down here, I'll select by range of stations. The beginning of our project is 150, and the end of our project, we'll click on this field and select the pick button right here, and then navigate to the end of our project and snap to the end of the actual alignment. For our left swath and right swath, we want 200 feet, so I'll click in here and type 200, and the same thing for the right swath. Note that even though this may go beyond the extent of our corridor object, it does not matter. It will only calculate volumes and materials within the boundaries of the actual corridor model. We'll change our increments to 25 foot for our tangents, 25 foot for curves, and 25 feet for spirals, even though we don't have any in this project. Make sure you adjust your range start to true, as well as the range end to true as well, and select OK. This will create a sample line group on its own layer that we will use for volume calculations. To do volume calculations or any kind of earthwork volumes, we need to go to the Settings tab to look at how this is processed. In the Settings tab, Quantity Takeoff area, there is a quantity takeoff criteria that you need to define for earthwork and material volumes. I do not have an earthwork volume yet, so let's go ahead and create one. So, to create a new quantity takeoff criteria, we will right-click on Quantity Takeoff Criteria and choose New. Go to the Information tab, and we'll give this a name of Earthwork. Go back to the Material list, and there are two data types that you can add in here, a surface or a corridor shape. First, let's create a new material. So click on Add New Material, and we'll also call this one Earthwork. And press Enter. In the quantity type, click on that, and choose Earthworks. Now we need to add a surface. So we'll first start with the Combine DG and click the plus sign, and this will be our base surface. Note that there are options for cut and fill factors depending on the surface type that you have. You also have refill factors as well, depending on the specifications for your project. There's also a shape style, and this will actually display in the cross-section view if you so desire it to, and we'll leave it at basic. Let's go ahead and add our comparison surface by selecting the subgrade and choose the plus sign, and then in the condition column, changes to the compare type. Click OK. We now have a new quantity takeoff criteria called Earthwork. Let's go ahead and compute our materials now. To do so, there's a couple of ways. The fastest way is to select the actual sample line and go to the Launchpad panel and choose Compute Materials. Notice how it goes right to that alignment as well as the sample line group goes to the top of the list because we put the exclamation point there. Click OK, and then in the Quantity Takeoff criteria dropdown, select the Earthwork Quantity Takeoff criteria we just created. Note the options available to calculate your volume. You can do average end area, which is the standard way of doing it, but you can also do prismoidal and composite volumes as well. Make sure you toggle on curve correction tolerance, as this will enable curve correction around curves in your alignment. Note how we are prompted to select our EG and subgrade. So we'll click on the click here and pick combined EG. And then for subgrade, we want bypass 1 subgrade. Click OK, and the Earthwork volumes are calculated. Press Escape to clear your selection set. Now let's say we wanted to add a table to our file to show the volume calculations. In the Quantity Takeoff category, there are table styles for doing so. We have total volume and material. We are interested in the total volume table styles. If I click on the cut and fill, and then right-click and then edit, this is where you change any of the properties for a table for Earthwork volumes. If we go to the Data Properties tab, you'll notice that you can change any of the columns to display whatever you'd like to display. To change any of the columns or remove them, simply click on the plus or the X sign. And then to change or edit any of the values that the columns are displaying, just simply double-click in here and choose the appropriate property that you want from the Properties dropdown. To create a table, simply select the sample line and click on Add Tables and select Total Volume from the dropdown. Here's the table style that we just looked at, the alignment, the sample line group. Again, notice how that exclamation point is helping us go in here and select it properly. And then you can split the table if you'd like to, so let's just leave it at 20. And of course, you probably want it to be dynamic. That way, if any of the quarter model or any of the objects change, the table will update automatically. Click OK and place it in the drawing. Notice how the table is placed properly based on the parameters that I defined in there. If you want to change any of the settings or the way the table is actually displaying, simply select it. The ribbon shows you a contextual sensitive ribbon. And then I'll click on Table Properties here. And let's say we want to change this to 40 rows. Click OK. And now it's updated the tables to reflect that change. Because this part adds a little more dynamic functionality, which can slow your drawing down a little bit, you may want to instead create a table report and then print that out in Excel or plot it from Excel. To do so, I'll select my sample line again. And from the Launchpad, I'll choose Generate Volume Report. Again, it goes to the correct alignment automatically. And then it goes to the correct sample line list because that's at the top of the list. And as far as how to report on these, there's something called style sheets. So what's first going to happen is Civil 3D will create an XML report, and then a style sheet is used to report on that XML data. If I click the Browse button here, you'll see that there are some predefined style sheets that I can use to generate my reports. For Earthworks, you want to use the earthworks.xsl file. If you're a savvy enough programmer, you could actually create your own style sheets and report on that XML file and then navigate to that file that you created. We'll click Open, and then we'll click OK. And when Internet Explorer opens up, you will get a dialog box warning you about scripts, and you want to say yes. And there's our volume report. If you want to export this out to Excel, simply right-click and export to Microsoft Excel. You can also press Ctrl-A and then right-click, copy, and then paste that into Excel as well. And of course, you can change any of the formatting as you need to. Now, let's say we actually want to display that table in a section view. So with a section selected, I'm going to actually create a section view of just this section. I'll go through the wizard to verify all the settings. And in the section display options, you'll notice that there is now an Earthwork category. I also want to make sure that no label styles will display, so I'll click in the Change Labels column, and I'll simply set the surfaces here to no labels. And then for my bypass 1 corridor model, let's set this to View-Edit. And here's where you define the style, which is by default the one that was selected in the Quantity Takeoff criteria for the actual volume calculation. We'll click Next. I do not want any data bands, so I'll set this to none. And then when I click Next here, you'll notice that there's now this option for section view tables. I could do total volume or material. In this case, we don't have a material just yet. We'll discuss materials in a future video. So let's select the total volume. And a table style is defined right there, which is the one we already have for the other table. We'll click Add, and we'll just leave the default settings, and I'll show you in a second how you can actually change that. We'll click Create Section View, put this in the drawing. And as you can see, we now have a table defined next to this section. If you had multiple section views, this table could display next to all of them, and you could print that out to do any kind of checking or as a record copy for your volume calculations. Now, this is obviously not in a very good location, so how do you change it? Press Escape to clear your selection set of the sample line, select the section view, and then we'll go to the section view properties, and in the volume tables tab, I can change the anchor about which this table will display. So I want this to be displayed at the bottom right. Click Apply, and notice how it automatically puts it in that location. I could also change the anchor of the table itself, but top left is the top left part from the bottom right part of the section view. So that's good enough for me. Note you can also change some offsets here as well. Select OK, and there's my table in the section view. Notice the shape that is appearing automatically to show me the cut and fill areas of this section. That's pretty cool stuff. This concludes this video discussing earthwork volumes. When a quantity takeoff criteria is applied to a sample line group, a material list is added to the sample line group properties. You can then use the material list to create a material volume table or report. In this video, we'll examine the process for creating material volumes and a table and a report. The first thing you need to establish is a quantity takeoff criteria for the materials that you will be getting quantities from. In the Settings tab, Quantity Takeoff category, we have the quantity takeoff criteria. Let's go ahead and expand that, and in this drawing, we already have a material list created. However, you can create your own by simply right-clicking on the category and selecting New. I'll open this material list by double-clicking on it, and you'll notice we have one pavement category in there. So let's go ahead and create our materials, and we'll give them names based on the objects that are in our corridor model. So let's first look at the pavement, and let's assume that all the pavement layers are in the same category and we'll use the same quantity item. So first, I'm going to change my data type to corridor shape, and then once you do so, the Select Corridor Shape dropdown will actually update with all of the available corridor shapes. Remember, in a corridor model, you have point, link, and shapes within them. This looks to just the shapes to get volume calculations. So we want Pave 1, so I'll select Pave 1. And then while I have this selected, I will click the Add button. I'll go ahead and select Pave 2 and add that in there as well. This pavement material that I no longer need, I can actually remove. We can do so by clicking the X button right here. Now we need to add a new material. So let's select the Add New Material button, and we'll give this a category of Base Course. Make sure you have data type set to corridor shape, and then in the corridor shape, select the base course. Before we add this in here, we need to make sure we change the quantity type to structures. This is not a cut, fill, cut and refill, or earthworks quantity. This is a structures quantity. Not in the terms of structures like a bridge, but structures like the actual shape structure. So we'll click Add here, and we now have a base course material. Let's go ahead and add a new one, and we'll call this one Subbase. Change my quantity type to structures, change the corridor shape to Subbase, and select Add. We now have a pavement course, base course, and subbase. In our corridor model, we do have curbing and we do have sidewalk. However, we will use different methodologies to generate quantities for these two objects. We are done. Let's click OK, and now ready to compute that material volumes. I'm going to select one of my sample line objects, and notice that in the Launchpad panel, we have the Compute Materials tool. Select Compute Materials. Notice how it goes right to the alignment, and we already have this sample line group from the previous exercise where we did volume calculations for the cut and fill volumes. and then we'll just click OK. Notice how the material list is defaulting to the Earthwork. We want to import another criteria, the one that we just edited. So let's go ahead and click on that button. And now we'll select that quantity takeoff criteria from the drop-down right here, the one that says material list. I'll click OK. And now we are prompted to select the shapes that are in the quarter. So we'll just match the shapes as we've done so when we created the list. We'll pick Pave 1, Pave 2, the base course, and the sub-base course. And click OK. Now what you'll also notice is that we still have material list 1 for the Earthworks, but let's go ahead and actually rename this, and we'll call this one Materials. And we'll also rename material list 1, since we forgot to name it, Earthworks. That way, when we choose them to create a report, we can distinguish between the two. Now we only have pavement base and sub-base. Now let's say we actually have a custom corridor shape that was not part of our standard material list, and we'd like to edit right here. So without actually having to go into the quantity takeoff criteria, edit it, and recompute the materials, we can simply click on the Add New Material right here, and I'll change this to sod, as we have a custom sod shape within our corridor model, and we'll change this to structures, and change this to corridor shape, and select the sod shape that's in the corridor model. Click the plus sign, and now we have that to include in our volume calculations. Notice the option to give a style to these different objects if you want them to appear in the table next to the cross-section. We'll click OK. Those volumes are calculated, and we will then be able to generate a report. Now that we have those materials computed, we can now create our volume tables or volume reports based on those materials. I'll go ahead and select a sample line, and let's first do the Generate Volume Report. So we'll select this, and notice how it goes right to the sample line group because it was given the name with the exclamation point to go to the top of the list. Now the material list, we have to make sure we select Materials right here. Also the style sheet, if I scroll to the right here, is defined to the Earthwork style sheet. We need to change this to be the Materials style sheet. We'll select the Select Material.xsl file, click Open, and then click OK. And then in your web browser, you'll be prompted to run script files. And so of course you will select Yes. And we now have a volume report for all the different materials in our corridor model. If you'd like to create a table within Civil 3D to actually plot from, let's say, a drawing, you can do so as well. In the Quantity Takeoff category in the Settings tab, there's table styles as well. So if we look at the material table, we have this area and volume table style already created for us. And if you look at the different columns, you can add columns, remove columns, and you can simply change the value or the property that is used by simply double-clicking in here. And in the text component editor, you can actually go in and change this to whatever property you want to add within here. So with the sample line still selected, let's go to Add Tables, Material Volume, and then we want to select the Materials table. And then, as you can see, you can create different tables based on the material that's been computed in the sample line group. Let's just pick Pavement, and we'll click OK. And then we'll just place it in our drawing. And now you have a running cumulative volume for your pavement quantities. If we look at the table, we notice it says Material Table, and it's not in any way, shape, or form distinguishing itself as a pavement material table. So let's go ahead and press Escape to clear your selection set of your sample line. We'll select the table, and we'll click the Table Properties dropdown, and select Edit Table Style. And in the table, what we want to do is double-click the title, and we actually want to give it the actual name of the material being calculated, because right now it says Material Table. So I will go ahead and double-click the material text, delete that, and add in, all uppercase, the material name. Select the Add button, put a space in there, press OK, then OK again, and now you'll notice that we have a pavement table. Just some quick ways to edit that within your drawing. You could then create tables for the other materials if you wanted to. This concludes this video discussing material volumes. You can add quantities to your drawings using Civil 3D's QTO Manager to apply pay items to AutoCAD Civil 3D objects or regular AutoCAD objects. Incorporating pay item information correctly into design plans, including plan sheets, summaries, and bid documents, is a major task for designers. You can use the QTO Manager functionality to automate the pay item process to reduce those errors. Pay items can be associated to AutoCAD lines, open or close polylines, blocks, or any AutoCAD or Civil 3D object after they have been created. When pay items are assigned to AutoCAD Civil 3D code set styles, a corridor object is automatically assigned those specified pay items, as well as any Civil 3D pipe network parts list that you associate pay items to. Those pipe and structures will automatically be tagged as well. The QTO Manager is located in the Analyze tab, QTO Panel, and then we have QTO Manager. In the panorama window, you will get the QTO Manager tab, which contains a pay item file that will be loaded into your drawing. So that's the first step that you actually need to do, is you need to click on the Open drop-down menu and select Open Pay Item File. This drawing already contains the Florida DOT's pay item file associated to it, and the file is located in the Datasets folder. Let's navigate to that folder. If you navigate to C:/Civil 3D Projects, Learning AutoCAD Civil 3D Infinite Skills, the References folder, you will see that there is a AECmerge.xml file. This contains all the pay items for the Department of Transportation's pay item list. Then we have the Florida Categories.xml file, which is a category file which will categorize all of these pay items. There's also an additional file called the Formula file, which contains formulas such as square yards, cubic yards, as well as many custom formulas that you may use when you quantify your objects in your file. We will discuss how to use this dialog box in a minute. Let's first go ahead and talk about the code set styles and the parts lists that you can automate for Quantity Takeoff. In the Settings tab, General Category, Multi-Purpose Styles, Code Set Styles, the Code Set Style is where you can automate some of your pay item quantities. I have a quarter model in this file with the visualization code set style associated to it. I'll go ahead and edit this, and what you'll notice is that in the different categories that you can apply quantities to, these are the link and point codes. You cannot apply quantities to shape codes because those are earthwork volumes and material volumes. If I go to the link code, you'll notice that in this code set style called sidewalk, I have 0522-2 as a pay item defined for it. To associate a pay item to a specific code in the code set style, simply click on the little truck icon here, and then from the list here, you can click the plus sign, and then navigate the pay item that you want to. Notice that in here, I can do a search by simply typing in the name of the pay item that I want. It could be the number or a description. It searches both. And then you can navigate to that specific pay item and then simply attach it. Note, and this is really cool, you can actually apply multiple pay items to an entity to get multiple quantities that you may need. I'll cancel out of this. Let's go ahead and look at the parts list. So as I navigate down to the pipe network parts list category, let's go ahead and look at storm sewer. So in the storm sewer parts list, I have the pipes and structures tab, and within each tab, you can define specific quantity items that you want to apply to these entities. Again, simply by clicking the Add button right here, I can navigate to the specific pay item that I want to associate to this part when it gets placed in the drawing. So although the code set style can automate some of the pay items, there are certain things that you will need to do after the quarter object is created. For instance, I have a linear feature within my quarter model, let's say top of curb, that I want to actually apply a pay item to. So I'm going to select my quarter object, and I'm going to go to the quarter properties. And because this is a linear feature, I can't really use the point or link code as it will not apply a linear calculation to that type of object. So within the feature lines category, let me go ahead and sort this by codes. You'll notice backup curb or probably top of curb, either one will give us the same exact length. And then in the pay item, I'm going to actually select the truck icon. And then within this field here, I'll type in curb and press enter. And I'll navigate down to my pay items, and I will notice that the curbs list has been narrowed down to the ones that I want, and I want the type F curb. Notice how the formula automatically shows you the type of formula that will be applied. this is reading the formula file. If let's say you want to overwrite that formula, you can simply click on here, and then you can go in and actually edit the parameters and change a different formula. To look up the different expressions that you can put in there to automate your quantities, simply click the help and you'll see the syntax you need to type in here. I'll click OK. That pay item is now associated to the back of curb. I will now click OK. Note that if you change something about the pay item, you'll be prompted to rebuild the corridor, as it needs to do so to update your pay item list as well. Let's press Escape to clear my selection set, and let's look how to actually apply some pay items to regular standard AutoCAD objects. So within my panorama window, I'm going to actually turn Auto Hide off so we can keep this up. And the way that this works within the QTO Manager tab is you basically right-click on any of the items that you want to assign to regular AutoCAD objects. You also have these icons, which allow you to add, remove, and append different pay items too. You can also edit pay items on specified objects. If you make this a little bit bigger, you'll notice that there are some additional options as well here, which allow you to simply highlight objects within the drawing, and so on. Be careful with this option here, as it may cause the drawing to act a little slowly. For now, we'll leave clear highlight on. So the first thing I want to do is I want to apply a pay item to my guardrail here. So I've got some guardrail within my drawing, right here. I also have some end treatments as well. So first, let's type in the word guardrail within my QTO Manager, press Enter, and you will then notice that the list is narrowed down so you can go in and actually apply guardrail. So this is the guardrail on the right side, so I want to actually select this one here, and I'm going to right-click and then assign pay item. Notice the command line window says select object. I simply need to select that object. I could keep going here, but that's the only one that I have. Press Enter. And now if I hover my mouse over this object, you will notice the tooltip applies the pay item to it, which is really cool to see. So now that I've applied the guardrail, I can now look in this list here as it already says guardrail, and I can go in and find the end treatment that I need. So I have a melt, which is a modified eccentric load terminal, and I'll right click on this and we'll say assign pay item, and I will select that object. And I also have one at the end here. And let's go ahead and zoom in. And let's select this object as well. If I want to see what objects in my file have this pay item selected to them, I can also simply right-click on this, select Object with Pay Item, and notice how it selects those entities for me and even updates the Properties palette so I can see what actual objects I have selected. I now want to apply some pay items to some proposed tree blocks that I have in my drawing here. Let me turn Auto Hide off temporarily. And let's zoom into this location here. So what I'll do is I will select one, right-click, select Similar, so I can do this all at once. And now what I'll do is in here, let's just simply clear this. I'll press Enter. And I happen to know, without having to do any searching, that I can just simply navigate to the landscape area, which I have grassing, seeding, sodding, etc. here. And the quantity item is these large plants complete. So I'm going to right-click on this, assign pay item, and notice how it automatically does it because I created the selection set first. If I press Escape and then hover, you'll notice that that pay item is applied to that object. If I want to add this as a favorite because I do use this a lot, I can right-click on this, Add to Favorites List, and then that will be applied to my favorites, which is located at the top of the list. So I can expand this, and there's my favorites. So let's say I want to apply an area in my drawing for a specific quantity. So I'm going to isolate my layer here. So I'll go to the Home tab, and then I'll go to Isolate Layer. And let's go ahead and isolate this layer right here. So I've got this closed area, and of course this will actually work with objects that aren't necessarily closed, and it'll actually flood the file with that area. I'll type in clearing, and then I'll look for that specific quantity. So here's my clearing and grubbing. I'm going to right-click on this and select Assign Pay Item to Area. I can then click in the file. Notice how it automatically floods the file, finds the closed areas, and then I can press Enter. I can freeze this layer if I don't want to use this or plot this layer, of course, but it can still be used to do a quantity takeoff. And notice how I've got that quantity takeoff already done for me. Let's go ahead and do a layer previous to see my layer states from before. Once you've assigned all your pay items, If you'd like to see all the pay items applied in your drawing, you can go to the Highlight Objects with Selected Pay Items, and it will actually highlight them for you within the file with a certain color. So let's go ahead and turn that off. And now what we're going to do is actually do some quantity takeoff. So let's turn Auto Hide off there, go to the Analyze tab, and then in the QTO panel we have Takeoff. So right here you have some options where you can actually limit the extents to a certain alignment station range. You can report on selected pay items only if I wanted to actually select those objects, and even give a detailed report where I could just pick specific entities. We'll just compute the entire drawing. Click Compute, and typically you start out with this interface first, where you get this XML file. And what you want to actually do then is change the format to a summary of some sort. So you can do a summary of HTML, you can do a summary within a text file, and then you can actually select this text and then copy and paste it. You can also place it in the drawing if you want to place it in the drawing as a table of some sort. Most probably what you're going to do is select all this text, copy it into Excel, and then add in your actual cost to get your engineering estimate. A lot of automation, a lot less user error by accidentally selecting the wrong area or wrong calculation. And as you can see, it automates all this process using the form of the file and gathering all the quantities necessary. Once that's done, I'll click Draw here, and this will actually place this in the file as a takeoff report. This uses the current layer as well as the current textile to place it in the drawing. This concludes this video discussing quantity takeoff. So what is a mass haul diagram? A mass haul diagram displays a graphical view of material moved in a proposed design site. It can display balance points, free haul and overhaul regions, and grade points. Mass haul diagrams are graphs with stations along the x-axis and earthwork volumes along the y-axis. The middle axis is called the balance line. When the mass haul line goes up, it tells you that the project is in a cut region, and when it goes down, it is in a fill region. As you can see in the diagram here, this explains a mass haul diagram graphically for you. As with everything in Civil 3D, there are settings and styles for mass haul diagrams. If we go to the Settings tab, you'll notice that there is a mass haul line section, and we can look at the mass haul line styles, and this is simply the style that will display for the different parts of the mass haul line. This can be the free haul line above and the free overhaul area as well, and you can define the hatch pattern below here. The mass haul view is very similar to the profile view and allows you to change any of the graph vertical exaggeration, the grid exaggeration, title annotation, horizontal and vertical axes, as well as the display tab, which allows you to change any of the subcomponent displays to on or off, as well as the layers, colors, line types, and so on for those different subcomponents of your mass haul view. To create a mass haul diagram, simply select one of your sample lines, and you'll notice in the Launchpad, the Create Mass Haul Diagram appears. So one of the necessary steps to creating a mass haul diagram is to first have a sample line group and sample your earthwork volumes between the subgrade surface and the existing ground surface. We'll click on Create Mass Haul Diagram. This opens up the Create Mass Haul Diagram wizard. First, you select the alignment and sample line group. As you can see, they are selected for us as the sample line was selected in the view, and it grabbed that information from the sample line group. You can pick the mass haul view style as well that we just discussed. Click Next. Here's the material list that you generated with the Compute Materials command to generate your volumes. You'll notice the ability to define total volume, a cut volume, a fill volume, or an unusable volume as well. Here's the mass haul line style that we also discussed in the Settings tab. Click Next, and in this part of the wizard, this is the balancing options. So typically, with construction, the distance that is free as far as cost goes is about 500 feet, but every project is different and you can define that distance right here. You can also add bar pits or add dump sites as well to better balance the project. Let's just create the diagram and we'll add some afterwards. It's asking for the lower left corner of our mass haul view. Click on the drawing and there's our mass haul view diagram. If you look to the y-axis, you'll see that the volumes are in the y-axis and the x-axis provides the stationing. This is the mass haul line, and any of the settings discussed are displayed with the mass haul line style. Let's just say at the beginning of our project, we want to actually add a burrow pit of about 5,000 cubic yards based on our calculations. So as with everything in Civil 3D, select the object first, and then the contextual tab will give you options to change properties or add settings to the object you selected. So let's select balancing options, and you'll notice that we have the ability to add a burrow pit or add a dump site. So as stated, let's click on the Add Burrow Pit. Here's where you can select the station. Notice the pick button, which will allow us to select the station in the drawing. In this case, we'll simply add a volume of 5,000. Click OK. And notice how the mass haul diagram automatically updates with that change. You can also generate mass haul reports if you'd like to. I'll select my mass haul diagram again and go to the Generate Volume Report. And then notice how the sample line group and material list are already pre-selected for us because we selected the mass haul view. But we still have to change the style sheet, so don't forget that. Because right now, by default, it goes to the earthwork.xsl file. I'll go ahead and click Open, and we'll select the mass haul multiple materials.xsl file. Click Open, click OK, and then in Internet Explorer, you are prompted to run scripts. Click Yes, and there's your report. If you'd like to print this, you could print this, or if you'd like to copy this to Excel, simply right-click, export to Microsoft Excel, or copy and paste it using the Control-C and Control-V options. This concludes this video discussing mass haul diagrams.